Welcome to the Mission Matters. The Mission Matters is a partnership between 1615 and Missio Nexus, who have a shared passion to mobilize God's people to be a part of His mission. The Mission Matters is hosted by Matthew Ellison, president of 1615, and Ted Esler, president of Missio Nexus. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And now, here are your hosts, Matthew Ellison and Ted Esler.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Mission Matters podcast. I'm Matthew Ellison and joined as always by my good friend and co-host Ted Esler. Ted, it's always a joy to be with you, my brother.
Yep, good to be here.
What a gift to be able to have these conversations about the mission of God. It's just really a blessing. So we always start off with a softball question, as you know, and want to talk about our most unusual cross-cultural experience. Like you, I've been to lots of countries, not as many as you. I've been to 50. You've been to what, 70, 80?
It bumped over 100. So,
oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It's hopeless. I'm not going to catch up to you, Ted. I don't think
I'm not sure congratulations is the right word actually for that.
Anyway, so I've got a lot of them. I'm sure you do as well. But for me, it was my first time overseas, summer of 1993. I spent that summer in Ghana, West Africa, a great introduction to Africa, very friendly country. I did some research going into the trip, wanting to learn about the culture. I didn't want to be naive and make those mistakes that we all make. But I was shocked when the pastor, we're walking down the street, grabbed my hand, started holding my hand, and we walked together for, blocks holding my hand. And I was just startled by it. Of course, this is very common in African cultures. It's a sign of affection. But it was shocking to me at the time. That's my strange cross-cultural experience.
All right, so I'm going to give you mine, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. It's a little bit gross, and I'm so sorry. But when I was relatively new to the world of missions, I was in a Central American country doing some missionary training, and I got put on a bus that was way overpacked, like twice as many people as should be on that bus. And I sat next to a woman that I felt so bad for. She had a baby with her with dysentery. And there's no diapers in that culture. And so it was quite aromatic. But every time the baby would start crying, she would just untie her top and it would flop open and she would nurse that baby. And she was just pressed right against me. And at one point I was trying to look away. So I had my head down and pushed up against that seat. And I felt this tickling on my elbow. And I looked down and I had a little bit of breast milk dripping off my elbow there. And I just thought, what in the world am I doing here? And it was a pretty earthy experience. So that's mine. On the show today, we have Jonathan Armstrong, and he's going to be sharing with us about a new book that he's co-authored with 𝙑𝙑𝙧𝙩𝙪. But let's throw the question over to you to get started, Jonathan. A cross-cultural experience that.
Yeah. Fascinating question. Thanks for welcoming me into the conversation.
Hey, before you go, let me just let our audience know that Jonathan was just diagnosed with COVID and heroically coming on the show despite that, but he's got his jacket on. He's got a little bit of chills going on. So
I'm calling
if you listen to this, he'll hopefully have been completely healed and I'll be behind him, but praying for your recovery. So
thank you so much. I am calling from Chicago. Chicago tends to be pretty cold, but today the parka is because I'm trying to keep the chills away. So thank you. Super glad to be with you on the show. Well, let's see. I'm not sure if this is the strangest cross-cultural experience, but it is a particularly joyful cross-cultural experience for me. 2 years ago this summer, in the summer of 2019, I got to go to the 𝙑𝙑𝙧𝙪𝙧𝙾 refugee camp in East Africa. That's northwest Uganda. And there, I got to interact with a beautiful church of South Sudanese Christians who were refugees in Uganda. And at one point in one of the services I was attending, a traditional dance broke out, which is basically, as far as I could perceive it and understand it, one jumps up in the air holding hands with a partner. So I got to dance with the South Sudanese in a refugee camp, and I count that as a very special privilege.
Awesome. Well, Jonathan has recently co-authored a book with 𝙑𝙪𝙑𝙑𝙑𝙪, and I think it's just a very timely title, and the title is Virtual Reality Church: Pitfalls and Possibilities, or How to Think Biblically About Church in Your Pajamas, VR Baptisms, Jesus Avatars, and Whatever Else is Coming Next. Very intriguing title. And like I said, very timely. I think we're gonna just jump right into it. And so usually I like to ask authors why this book and why now, but I don't think I need to ask that question, because I think why this book and why now seems obvious. But let me begin with this one. In the book you write, anyone who has studied the history of technology knows that technological change is always a Faustian bargain. So as a prelude to the conversation, just to unpack that a little bit for us.
Superb. So that's a quotation from Neil Postman that I found very helpful in the book. I was working with a co-author on this project, 𝙑𝙑𝙑𝙑, who teaches at Dallas Theological Seminary and who's been working with media and emerging media types for many years. So as we were trying to come up with a conceptual frame of reference for how to approach technology, we find what's called media ecology. We find that intellectual lens to the study of media very, very helpful. And Neil Postman there, he's one of the founders of what we call media ecology. And the principle that he's trying to communicate is that the tools that we use change us. So we are used to thinking about tools as ways that we as subjects can bring about change in an environment, change on the objects that we interact with. Technology is not a classic tool in that regard, because not only does technology allow us to change the environment, but it very dramatically changes us as the users. So that's the principle at play there. Neil Postman, also in that introductory chapter, we flesh this out in detail. Neil Postman talks about media ecology because he says, imagine the way that ecology changes. Imagine the way that, for example, a rainforest changes. And if you were to take a species of caterpillar and to introduce a new species of caterpillar into a rainforest that had never been there before, you're not just changing one element, you're changing the total environment. Yeah. And Neil Postman says that's what's happening with media. We're not just introducing a new tool when we talk about the introduction of the internet. We're talking about the generation of a whole new culture. So we go through some of those concepts in the first chapter.
Listeners probably know that isn't Neil Postman also the guy that said the media is the message? Is that him?
Marshall McLuhan, but one of his colleagues.
You got me there. Yeah. That's right. Okay, so very good. Very good. Go ahead, Matthew.
Jonathan, Netflix doesn't need a plug from us, but as you're talking about that, of course, The Social Dilemma is a documentary that just addresses this very idea that we are being transformed, our behaviors are being transformed. So, in light of that, there's a lot of division about virtual church, right? Some people are for it. Some people see it as a poor substitute. I mean, we're divided all over the place today, right? What are your overall thoughts about church being done virtually? What are your feelings?
So I think it's such an important topic that someone should write a book about it. Okay, so I think that this is such an important moment that we need some sustained reflection on this. And what I would love to invite people to do is to step away from sort of are you for it or are you against it? Unfortunately, that level of thinking just won't prove productive. It just won't serve people. So we need to open the hood and get into the machine here and figure out what are parts of our religious life as Christians that can be experienced in online environments, or where online tools can be genuinely spiritually beneficial for us, and what are parts that can't be migrated to online platforms and that we shouldn't try to migrate to online platforms. So I would like to be calling to people through this book to a period of sustained reflection. I do think that there are certainly things that online environments offer us that are hugely beneficial to mission networks or to churches. And maybe the top of that list is prayer. So you can conduct really cool prayer services, services that are very useful for people's spiritual progress and development through online technologies. Just last night, I lead a prayer service for my home church here in Chicago. So we were praying together, as we often do on Zoom, and then we went on a field trip. And I told everybody, hey, everybody, we're gonna go to another prayer room, and we're gonna join these South Korean prayer warriors who were leading a prayer meeting at this time. So we all went on a field trip together. We joined these Korean believers on the other side of the world for a few moments of prayer. Those things, I think, are not just novel and exciting, but those can really give us renewed and refreshed spiritual perspective. But there's all kinds of other things that we need to address too, like internet addiction, and et cetera. All kinds of dangers to watch out for. So I'd like to call us to some careful reflection.
When I hear you answer that question, I think of how, I think it was J.D. Greer, but I'm not positive. It's not my day to remember names, obviously, but some pastor said, boy, this is the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Some pastor said, just 2 months ago, everybody was against Zoom church. Now all pastors are basically doing it. And, he's making the point that technology just came on top of us like a waterfall. There wasn't a lot of, how could you stand against it in light of the realities that we were facing? It makes me wonder, and I think, again, this is why people should read your book, how much thoughtful ecclesiology has been done thinking about these kinds of things, if any. Any thoughts on that? Has this been something was it easy to research, for example?
There was a lot of things that I wish had already been written that we had to sort of piece together. And you're right, one of the basic premises of the book is that the Zoom church phenomenon that we're all experiencing at one layer or another, that is really just the tip of the iceberg. So that's why we're inviting careful and deeper reflection here, because what's going to happen in the next number of years, even decades, is that these electronic tools that we use for communication and to convene groups of people online, those tools will certainly become richer and offer more ways for us to interact and will become more ubiquitous. So Zoom church is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know what's coming in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, but I pretty much can guarantee that we will see an uptick of the number of tools allowing people to convene and in the number of communities that are practicing those ways of doing church.
Jonathan, there's a phrase that we turn all the time as an organization, and it goes like this. Many churches don't do missions well because they've not thought about missions well. And I think this would apply to this as well. I love your idea of careful, thoughtful reflection. Let's take some time to pause and consider the implications of doing church in a virtual context. And that leads me to my next question. You talk about a whole theology that is needed to address VR church. Maybe you could talk about some of the big issues we should be thinking about.
Great. So I think that the fundamental change that we're seeing is the passing of a scientific worldview towards a technological worldview. And so just like a couple hundred years ago, we had the rise of a scientific worldview, and our theology was reconfigured to think in these scientific categories. And evangelical theology is classically defined as very much synchronized according to these post-Enlightenment scientific categories. A huge theological project on that scale is going to be required to bring Orthodox theology in alignment to this new technological reality that we're inhabiting. So I work with college students. I currently teach at Moody Bible Institute. And when you work with young people today, you realize that how deeply their imagination is being reshaped by their experiences in virtual media. And so one of the things that we say there in the book is virtual reality is great and it's important to study. The reason why is because even after you take those goggles off, the way that you see the world has been reconfigured. And so that's the tipping point that we're trying to address in this book, is that people's whole worldview is being reshaped by by these virtual experiences. And I don't see that as bad or dystopian. I think there are going to be ways to express faith and share faith, maybe even new ways to make sense of Christian faith to people through using those tools.
I noticed, when I read the book that you use the VR, virtual reality phrase a lot. That was maybe a little bit of a disconnect for me, because to me, VR is just one application of technology. But you're really talking about something much larger than just VR, right?
So, yes, we use two phrases to address virtual technologies. We'll speak of virtual reality in the book, or VR. And when we do, we mean the goggles, like an Oculus Quest device or something like that you put on and you see the world in stereoscopic vision. We also use the language somewhat more loosely. We'll speak of virtual church or virtual this or that. And virtual there, we just mean any online way of convening groups of people. So I think what's happening is at this present moment, really the number of people who have the full-on virtual reality headsets are quite few, probably just maybe 10 million or so in this country have one VR headset or another, but it's still very much a minority. But what we anticipate in this book is that new way of interacting with digital media, that will become the screen of the future. So just as we currently use our computer screens, and we have used our computer monitors for several decades as the primary interface with computer data, it seems clear to me, and I buy Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the future of computing, that we're going to interact with computers in the future in a stereoscopic, three-dimensional environments. And that's what virtual reality as classically defined is. So I anticipate that the way we do any internet-based activity will probably be in these stereoscopic, spatially organized computing platforms in the future. And that's why we address virtual reality primarily in this book.
So out of curiosity, Matthew, do you have a VR headset?
I do.
Uh-huh. Have you ever experienced church?
I have not experienced church. I should, it's not mine, it's my son's, but there's one in the house, let's put it that way.
That doesn't count.
Okay, and I've experimented, but I wasn't very interested.
So I've got a headset. I have a Gear, Galaxy Gear with my phone kind of headset. So it's a low end one. But better than Google, the Google Cardboard thing. And I have tried to introduce mission agency leaders to the technology. At a CEO retreat, we gave everybody the Google Cardboard kit, and we had them do an experience together. Mm-hmm. And I have only seen resistance to that, especially among mission leaders. Mm-hmm. Part of the resistance, I think, is a bit of, there's an age issue here, because mission leaders tend to be older, and it's technology. But I think just also a suspicion that this is not real church, that this is some kind of fake experience. Did you come up against widespread attitudes in the evangelical community that's similar to that, Jonathan? Mm-hmm. Or you feel like there's real adoption going on in the evangelical community?
Yes, I respect those questions. Those are perfectly fair questions. And I've also, if I'm honest with you, I've also experienced a lot of mixed reactions to virtual reality as a medium. So one of the privileges of the last couple of years of my work with Moody is that I was able to be the founding director of Moody Bible Institute's virtual reality lab. And the cool thing about that was I got to give literally hundreds of people their first VR experiences. And I watched all kinds of reactions, some of which were positive, but many of which, maybe 2/3 of which, were not immediately positive. And so I think there's a couple things going on. One is that this conversion from screens to stereoscopic reality, that's technically much more difficult than we thought. So and if I've been following virtual reality carefully for about 5 years or so, and I can see very clearly the industry misjudged how difficult that transaction would
Yeah.
be. So there was a huge amount of hype, which has not proven true. I personally am still basically an optimist that this type of technology will become the preferred way to interact with digital data, but it's taking longer. I grant it's taking longer. The other thing that I've watched working in an educational institution is that an organization that has deep commitments to physical property simply is not at liberty to completely overhaul their strategy.
Yeah.
So, and this will be not just true for educational institutions that have lovely properties, but this is going to be true for churches too. So, communities that are necessarily invested in the maintaining of a physical property probably de facto will hope this technology goes away. I don't think it will, and I continue to follow the technical improvements. A lot of very smart people are working hard to fix these and increase the practicality of using virtual reality, and I'm basically an optimist that those problems will be resolved within a number of years.
So Ted, I'm going to go off script here. Hope that's okay, Jonathan. But I know there's a lot of talk going on about people who will never return to a physical building. I just want to know, are you hearing that? What are your thoughts on that? Maybe you even have some data related to that. But now that, they've grown accustomed to church in pajamas, as you write about in the book, I just don't want to get up. I'm just going to stay at home. You hear that going on? I mean, is that real?
I do. I only have anecdotal evidence too. I don't have real statistics to share. But I think we are probably agreeing there, Matthew, that you can't change a huge part of our culture quickly, like the COVID protocols have done for us all, and then expect that everything's going to go back. It's probably impossible for things to go back. Our organizations, our churches, our businesses have spent such huge amounts of effort to reframe their protocols. It probably is not possible to go back. And I think psychologically or culturally too in the church, I'm not sure if it's going to be impossible for everybody to go back, but certainly for a significant number of our people, I think, are obligated at this point to provide other ways of convening as a Christian body.
Yeah. I was recently in Pennsylvania doing some work with the church, and I had the opportunity to preach on Sunday. And this is a church that, you would think COVID was not there. In the county, there was very limited restrictions. People were hugging, shaking hands. And I have to tell you, I told my wife, I haven't had COVID. I have been vaxxed, but I said, I just got vaxxed yesterday, actually. But over the weekend, I said, Renee, I don't have COVID, obviously, but if I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it after this trip because these people are so eager for fellowship. And I just have to tell you, my commentary on this, the gathering of the brethren in person is a grace of God. It is beautiful. And I was just overwhelmed with emotion because, I live in New Mexico. Ted knows this. The restrictions here are still some of the worst in the country, and they have been. So, when I do go to the physical building, we started to go back again. We're so far apart from one another. And it was just amazing to have contact. It was beautiful. I was overwhelmed. I'm worshiping and I'm in tears and I'm thinking of Psalm 133. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in unity. There God commands a blessing. It's like oil flowing down Aaron's beard. It's like the dew on Mount Hermon. I was refreshed. It was like oil was pouring on me. And, just anyway, I hope people come back to the building. And I know church isn't a building, but I hope they come back to gatherings. Let's just put it that way.
And I do want to affirm what you're saying there, Matthew. In the book, at several levels, we try to make sure that people know we're not advocating that we give up on a building, that churches abandon their buildings and that we only meet online. Not at all. There is currently and there always will be a unique value in person-to-person communication sitting right next to each other that can't be replicated in virtual reality. We do think that some things that churches do could be improved by migrating to digital platforms, but we are advocating that churches retain some way of interacting in person to person.
Excellent. And I appreciate your encouragement. We need to think well about this. This is a reality. It has big implications. And I love the idea of developing a whole theology. I think it'd be really fruitful for church leaders to say, this isn't going away entirely. Let's think about the implications and how we're going to address this, as opposed to just going for it, right? So, hey, thank you so much, brother. It's been great. This is a time on the show, Ted, where we talk about something you like.
It's going to be a little bit odd this time around because I'm not going to talk about something you like that you can buy or anything like that. Experience, but so Matthew, I think I got a couple of beehives, and I just got to tell you, I really like bees. And it's weird to say that, but let me tell you what happened yesterday. I feel like I learned something every single day about just how incredible creation is. So yesterday so we've had rain here for 3 or 4 days in a row. And yesterday the weather kind of broke, and about 10:30, the sun was out. It was just beautiful, gorgeous out there. My wife comes into my office, and the beehives are right outside my office window, just right over here. And she looks out the window and she says, "What's going on out there?" And I look, and there are thousands and thousands of bees twirling around in circles all around the area where the beehives are. And I'm telling you, it's a lot of bees. And I'm thinking, what in the world's going on? So I quickly go out there. Now, bees do something called swarming, where, either the whole hive or part of the hive will take off to form a new hive. But usually when they do that, they're in a little tight ball, and they're docile. That's when you see people that pick up bees and all that. They're typically swarming, and there's a queen in that ball. But this was different. I walk out there, and I stood in the middle of this. My coworker called it the bee-nado, like a tornado. And I stood there, and about 20 feet all around me are thousands of bees swirling. When I looked up, they went up about 50, 60 feet in the air in a big, huge cone of bees. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I got bees knocking into me. I mean, there's so many bees out there. It's just crazy. So I get on my phone. I call the local extension office, where they have kind of like a bee whisperer, a woman who you can call if you've got bee issues. And I told her what's going on. And she told me that it's common this time of year when the baby bees are hatching out, and that's what's going on right now. My hive is exploding in size. The bees have to do what are called orientation flights, and they'll get out of the hive. They'll fly close around the hive, getting bigger and bigger and higher and further away. And they're basically geolocating where that hive is so that they can go foraging and return back to the hive. And because we had so many days of rain, and we had a huge hatch out in the brood box, it was tens of thousands of baby bees taking their first flight. And they were just out. And she said, "I bet you in about an hour, it's all over." And she was 100% right. An hour later, there's no bees flying around. They're just coming in and out of the box, doing their regular foraging. But it just was a reminder to me of how incredible God created bees. And bees are something that I really like. So there you go.
Well, that story really intrigues me. I guess I should say I like bees too. And I think it's pretty clear that bees are not a fortuitous occurrence of accidental circumstance, right?
No,
right?
There's no way. I could tell you bee stories. I got a little file I keep on my computer. Whenever they do something astonishing, I just write a paragraph down, and it's about 7 or 8 pages at this point. They're all things that, had you told me before I was a beekeeper, I would never have believed. It's just incredible. Bees are one of the greatest testaments to God's creation that exists. So I like bees.
Beautiful. Hey, Jonathan, I forgot to ask you, tell our audience how they can get a hold of your book. I mean, obviously they can go to the normal sources, but tell us how to get the book.
Super. Well, it's a Moody Publishers book, so you can go to Moody Publishers online and order it. Virtual Reality Church. You can go to other websites too, but it's available on Moody Publishers' site.
Fantastic. Thanks again for being with us today. And I like bees too, Ted.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Awesome to be with you too. Thanks so much.
Before you go, would you visit our hosts' websites? There you will find a wealth of interesting and challenging information about the state of the Great Commission. They are 1615.org and missionexus.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss one. Mission Matters is presented through a partnership between 1615 Missions Coaching and Missio Nexus.